book, a novel entitled I'm Her, from the mind of Danny Boss, dedicated to her. Summary outline, I'm Her. Chapter 1, The Settlement. Chapter 2, The Doctrine. Chapter 3, The Selection. Chapter 4, The Breaking. Chapter 5, The Fight. Chapter 6, The Crossing. Chapter 7, The Wanderers. Chapter 8, The Doctrine's Reach. Chapter 9, The Hidden Encampment. Chapter 10, The Betrayal. Chapter 11, The Rising. Chapter 12, The Reckoning. Preface. In a world engineered from preservation rather than compassion, control becomes a doctrine and obedience the highest form of devotion. From birth lives a measured, cataloged, and bound by laws written to ensure survival of the few at the cost of many. She was never given a name beyond what was spoken in whispers. Her identity was not hers to shape, but rather a symbol of an unbroken chain of expectations. To her people, she was a vessel. To herself, she was a question that refused to be silenced. This story does not begin with triumph, nor does it promise comfort. It begins with a slow ache of awakening, and the kind that unsettles before it liberates. It is the record of one girl's defiance against a world that feared change more than their extinction. I'm Her is a story not simply of a single journey, but the timeless struggle between a woman's obedience and freedom, silence and truth, destiny and choice. Every page carries the weight of inheritance, and so too the whisper of rebellion. If you listen closely enough, you may even hear your own voice between the lines. Chapter 1, The Settlement. Her woke to the bell. 3-eyed notes that cleave the morning in equal parts, rise, assemble, and obey. A sound moved through the walled settlement like weather, slipping under doors, rattling croaky, drawing everybody into the same rhythm. She lay still and counted the echoes, and the way other girls were taught to count blessings. On the third echo, she swung her feet over the cot and placed them on the polished stone. The floor kept its own memory of feet, knew the path from the bed to the base into the door so well that he might have walked it without her. The room was a spare. Basin, shelf with folded linen, a square of a mirror cracked with a corner where a matron's hand had slipped years before. White upon nearly almost everything else white. She washed in silence, palms up, palms down, the water thin as breath. No one in the settlement slammed anything. Noise like doubt was a failure to contain itself. Outside the corridor smelled of flile and smoke, the two perfumes of order. Girls stepped in line, eyes lowered, mouth flat. A matron moved among them with a rod that struck that stone one for cadence, never flesh. There were other times and places for that. Her took her place in the stream and let herself be carried. She knew how to fold her shoulders, so she seemed smaller. How to keep her gaze soft so it didn't catch anything it shouldn't. She had perfected the art of presence without invitation. Presence without even being noticed. Breakfast was choreography over bowls and spoons. Steam rose in identical threads from identical porridge and condensed on identical faces. No words. The elders had said language was a ladder to dangerous heights. Better to keep the foot on the lowest rung. Still, Her tasted a word at the back of her mouth, like a secret seed. It did not have a shape yet, only direction. that being a way. After the bowls were stacked and counted, the girls were marched to the chapel for instruction. The chapel's windows were narrow as regrets. It colored glass. A boy and a girl held hands while a painted fire ringed the world beyond. Purity, said the glass. Preservation, it said. It said so much more. The matron's voice braided scripture with arithmetic. Births needed, bodies assigned, unions arranged, and futures tallied like grain. Her repeated after them, voice steady, while her mind slipped through the seals of the windows into a sky that had never been touched. The doctrine reached everywhere, even the muscles. There were work crews for mending walls, for laundering, for the tending of the stock. The boys trained elsewhere with their guardians, learning to stand between the settlement and the world's unruly tide. Only at festivals did paths cross between the boys and girls, and even then the crossing was choreographed. Eyes met by permissions, hand by appointment. Her had brushed by a boy at the well once before, though, and the gap from watching matron had snapped the air in two. Yet within the grid of rules, she learned to counter the exceptions. The baker's wife who smuggled a laugh into the crust, the child who dragged a stick to scowl a forbidden curve between a boot, erased it, and the man who folded his prayer twice as long as he could rest. The system was an instrument, tuned so tight it vibrated with its own strain. If she pressed the right string, perhaps it would sting a different note. At dusk, the unmarried girls were assembled in the courtyard to sing the hymns of preservation. The dress was white, and their voices made a single braid of sound that climbed the cold air and disappeared over the wall. Her sang and did not. Her mouth shaped the vows. Her heart chewed them and spit them back out. She watched the smoke from the cookhouses draw straight lines up the skyline, tally marks. She did not know what was being counted. Was it sins or was it days? There were stories that elders told, and there were stories that walls heard. The elders had spoke of 2025 as if a year that hinged the world, where numbers betrayed the faithful and the faithful learned to worship the count. They preached that the line must continue where it could still be drawn. The walls remembered hands, small, brown, calloused, belonging to the traders who once came before the gates closed for good. The walls remembered haggling and laughter and the language of barter. The walls knew that the settlement was not always a coffin, just with a view. Night brought the small mercy of privacy. Her lay awake and mapped the settlement on the ceiling of a roof, the bell tower like a spine, the houses like ribs, a gaze like clenched teeth. She rehearsed a walk that began somewhere inside her and ended in the notion of elsewhere. She tied to a picture, the world beyond the wall, and found the imagination had to invent colors brighter than she knew. Children with skin in the color of rain-dark soil, women with hair like a flock of crows turning at once, men whose laughter was not promise broken, but a promise refused. The first time she saw him was during an inventory. The matrons lined the girls along the reflective wall and ticked columns on a slate, bodies accounted for and futures pre-assigned. He entered with 3 elders, his robe cut off the same cloth as if it were from the walls. A hood shaded his face, but the presence altered the air as a coming storm does, shifting the pressure behind the eyes. The matron's voices dipped without meaning, too. He moved like someone who had been taught the distance itself as a virtue. Her knew to lower her gaze, but she did not. Defiance could be as simple as allowing eyes to be eyes. For a moment, the hood angled, and her found it. Beyond the shadows, something paused. It was enough to leave a bruise in the morning's memory. Days made a rope, and weeks pulled on it. The season turned over into sleep, and the doctrine kept time in the bodies of the women, and her felt the town's attention tighten around her, as if air itself was a corset. It was time for the choosing, and when it was announced, 3 extra bell strokes. A thin smile on the elder's voice. The settlement sighed as one organ. Girls were harvested at 17. Fields do not argue with the hand, but a field may have stones. That evening the matron spoke of virtue until the room grew smaller than the bed. They reminded her that a woman is a vessel, that God pours through obedience. She watched their mouths shape piety like pastry and wondered who had taught them hunger so profound it could be mistaken for holiness. When the light was exhausted and extinguished itself, she lifted her hands into the dark and imagined a sky that did not end with a glass that she had to drink. Between midnight and the morning, there a border even walls cannot see. On the thin strip of the night, she dreamed of a door she had never found, be it a gate that would be opened inward instead of out, that she could step through and never look back. The dream felt like a taste in her mouth, like metal, of some meaning, of some significance. And right at that moment, the bell rang. Rise, assembly, obey. So, she did as she knew. She rose and assembled and put obedience in her pocket like a stone she will one day skip across the surface of a new river.